Hi, I'm Jake Kouns, CEO of Risk-Based Security. Welcome to this edition of The Right Security, the show which we spend time talking with leaders and veterans in the security space, tackling the issues of the day. I want to welcome everyone to the show. In today's episode, I'm joined by Thompson. JJ, well, the easiest way to say it, he's a cybersecurity entrepreneur. He's got a 20-year track record of successfully anticipating future trends in the industry and then designing and implementing security capabilities. In April of 2008, JJ founded Rook Security, and they specialized in managed detection and response, early MDR. After running Rook as CEO for, I guess, over 11 years, they were then acquired by Sophos. He then led the Sophos strategy for their managed threat response service offerings. And JJ, he's now currently focused on a new stealth startup, which hopefully I'll get some information later in the show. JJ, welcome. Glad you're with us today.
Thanks, Jake. It's really a pleasure. I'm glad we finally got to sit down and do this together. It's been a while.
I know it has. So today, we're going to try to spend some time and hopefully better understand your thoughts on designing an effective cybersecurity program. So first, if someone says an effective cybersecurity program, what the heck does that actually mean? And what are the goals of a program?
Sure. So, this is interesting, especially since this is so near and dear to your expertise area. So you're definitely an expert in this space. The way I look at this is really cybersecurity is about really determining what capabilities you have, comparing it to what's needed, choosing how much of that gap to close. And choosing is the right word there because we all make those decisions whether or not we do it purposefully or in absentia, and then accepting or transferring the residual risk. And so what does effectiveness mean then in that concept? It would be, to me, performance over time. So what have you done and how has that resulted in expected outcomes that you anticipated versus things that caught you by surprise? And how did you perform with that combination of people, process, and technology over time?
Okay. So now that we understand what we're basically trying to accomplish, how can organizations actually go about trying to design an effective security program?
Yeah, sure. So the cool thing about this is that there's the choice element. So, I mean, an organization should be choosing their objective. They should be choosing that target and aligning to that target. And that's something that I feel like sometimes gets lost in translation a bit. Within the business that you're in, you have these conversations every day with clients, and I feel like many organizations skip past the step of saying, hey, here's the target that we're going to go after. And let's break that down into its component parts, decompose that objective into its component parts, determine which ones are in place versus the gap that we have. And then how much of that gap do we really want to close as a business? Do we need to close that gap fully? Or are we okay with accepting that residual risk? Break those pieces down into components and phases, and then decide selection of what the best fit components are for them and implement them.
How do organizations actually measure? Once they build this program, they think they've designed it well, and as all security professionals, I'm sure they're getting different advice from everyone that's an expert. So it's probably not as clear as it should be. But how can an organization then sort of measure this cybersecurity effectively? Maybe prove out that their program is as effective as they hope it should be.
Yeah, that's really hard to do these days. I think that's somewhat of a holy grail in the future that we all should strive for. And it's an area that's very near and dear to my heart. I don't think we have a good way to do that right now, aside from audits, periodic third-party audits. We've got continuous compliance technologies out there now. There's some new technologies just in the last year from Drata and others that are trying to put together different components that allow you to see the continuous posture. And those are all good because they're allowing you to quantify something that is hard to quantify based on measurable attributes. But to me, the challenge is you've got to know what data you care about, where those data are or compute, understand if you have coverage over those, meaning that the capabilities that you need to have in place to prevent, detect, and respond to active threats or to be compliant with something that is your business objective are in place. And then balance that with the changes in posture, relevant threats, and then your performance over time. And I think at the end of the day right now, the only way that we could probably all agree that your performance is in two areas. One is, do you have a reportable breach that you have to disclose to your business partners or to the public? And second is, or make an insurance claim for. And the second would be, do you pass your audit? Outside of that right now, I don't think that we have a good way to actually measure performance to an objective.
The whole you're doing a good job because you haven't had a data breach yet or not makes my eye twitch a little bit. So let me ask this slightly differently. If you're working on the security team, or you're responsible for that team, how can you as a practitioner actually demonstrate the value you're doing versus, hey, we haven't had a breach, so clearly I'm doing a good job?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's really hard to do right now. I think that's an area that most of our colleagues on the internal side are really having a hard time with. What do? Do you use a product dashboard that says basically, that you've neutralized all the threats that it chose for you? Do you focus on how much you've filtered in from your alerts through your SIM to the outbound and incidents that are actually worked by your team or investigations conducted by your team? What is that right answer? And I mean, if we stick on that for a second, I mean, it's been shocking how many organizations, enterprise organizations, end up viewing some of those as KPIs. So we have alerts in, and or events or alerts. I'm saying alerts these days instead of events in, just because now we've got so many damn alerts that are coming into the hopper that it's almost like events overall. But you've got events or alerts coming in. You've got some kind of a filtration method for how you prioritize those, whether very few of them based on assets and priority of the assets and the data that's on those assets. But then you filter based on whatever you can. And what I found to be a common curse that people fall into is the trap of filtering to the point of your capacity on the team at any given shift. And so that ends up incurring residual risk that isn't necessarily communicated effectively up the chain and causes a lot of problems. So I think there's a number of problems around this area. I've got a feeling you've got a few to add there.
I just remember, to your point, just filtering on the number of things that were blocked or whether it was an IDS or whatever it was, and we put these numbers out back in the day and we were like, these numbers are so horrible, but we don't know what else to show that they're spending their money on. So I think you're right. There is a huge gap there. But let me ask you this. How do organizations then navigate this? Like, it's not even just complex. It's like absurd. The landscape of so many security tools and so many solutions. There's just so many vendors out there. It's pretty brutal. How do they land in this sweet spot of, you need tools, you need partners, but how do you figure that out?
That's a mess. I can't imagine, I was thinking about this the other day. I was going through a completely different process in a whole other area of my life on something that I didn't really understand. And how do you select something that you don't understand? How do you choose who your Sherpa is going to be? How do you know if that Sherpa actually has a clue about what they're talking about, or if they're incentivized to just throw out something because of product spiffs or whatever it may be? It's really hard. It's really hard. And so one of the things that good consulting practices will do is help distill that objective the organization has into its component parts. And I know I brought that up earlier, but that's a pretty big deal. It's like, look, you may not need product ABC from vendor one, but you do need it. You need the category. So at this point, everybody needs a way. To me, I back it up a level and say, hey, what's effective threat detection and response look like? You have to know what you care about. You have to know where it is. You have to be able to prevent, detect, and respond to active threats wherever those areas are, and do so in a reasonable time period, preferably as fast as possible. So what does it take to have effective threat detection and response then? Well, it's basically, depending upon your environment, you would need the components for each of those categories. So what are some components we could all agree on? You need to have some sort of endpoint detection, prevention, and response capability. You need to have somebody who's able to look at the alerts that come from there and know whether or not it's something that is malicious or benign. You need to have a way to manage that to resolution through that investigation and close it out. And if there is something that's malicious going on, you need to be able to have a way to take actions as fast as possible. That starting point there is simple, but instead of shopping for that as a product by product perspective, think about it like a category. So we need something on my endpoint. I need a way to get that data to somebody who looks at it, and they need to have a way to manage to a methodology to evaluate it and act. Cool. Those are widgets. So if I take those different component blocks and I go select those component blocks, then you have a way to break this down into the business case for the organization instead of focusing on features of the specific products or services. And so I like to think that's the best way right now, is to really know what that business objective is, distill into its component parts, select which components fit your business use case and price and budgetary constraints, understand what absence of those components will do to your overall risk level, make a decision, and then move into selection. So I feel like that's the approach that most organizations should be taking at this point, and not necessarily starting with the spoon that they're being sold from a reseller or vendor perspective.
You did a podcast sort of interview with startup competitors several years ago now, and you shared some thoughts about sort of the mindset difference from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then you even talked a little bit about sort of Midwest challenges. And so I want to ask you this, bear with me on this. And by the way, for everyone,
You pulled that one.
It was great. Yeah, I'm going to put a link in the show notes for everyone. So it was really about sort of how organizations look at security. And you talked, and you were talking a little bit about Midwest, and then you sort of pivoted a bit into small to medium businesses. And you were saying how, like, they all need to have a Jimmy, and they think Jimmy's the best at security, and they trust Jimmy, and what Jimmy says is what they need with security. But you were then saying sort of that, like, the coasts, the East and West Coasts, it was not as much about people, but more about sort of the program, because they know people are going to cycle, and it's not sort of one person. So this leads me on to my question. I'm curious, with the pandemic, the shift to remote working, you still feel this way? Like, is it small to medium businesses and I'll say Midwest companies, do they still want a Jimmy? Like, they just trust, a person or people to do it?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that's still pervasive, not just the Midwest. I think I've even seen that become more pervasive as the cybersecurity challenges become bigger, and the stakes have become greater. The issue that I think we have as humans is that it's a natural instinct to go to people that we believe that we know and trust, necessarily sometimes over people that might actually be the relevant expert. And part of that reason is there's no way for me to know what the performance of history and the track record of any individual or any individual firm is at being successful at delivering on the outcomes that their customers expect. So in absence of having a way to know that this organization in the past has performed for their clients, or to know that this person as a CISO has been able to deliver successful outcomes, and so following what they say because they've delivered on others that are similar to me is the right way to go. That doesn't really exist aside from word of mouth referral, and no one gives you references that are going to be bad references. That's just not how it works. So the Jimmy's got it syndrome is something I still feel is pervasive, which is basically, think about it this way. If you have a family member who's got a medical condition, or say maybe somebody stumbles into a legal problem, you tend to go into, hey, call your closest friends who you think knows somebody who can help you. And you extend that transitive trust of your friend to that person. And you tend to do that because it's what's in arm's reach. It's what's addressable to you. It's what you see in your realm and your existence. You can't see past that. For me personally, I to bring it home a little bit, the level of financial advisory that I had access to, let's say in my 20s, was very different than I had in my 30s, and was very different now that I just turned 40 after selling a business. And so my ability to see who the best is at something and measure them based on their performance for me was somewhat non-existent. And so I picked people that somebody told me locally were really great at what they do, and they didn't end up being very good at what they do at the end. But I didn't know any better at the time, and I feel like a lot of people run into that same problem with the cybersecurity people that they entrust with solving their problems, which is further challenged by people looking at it as a role that can be solved institutionally, having a person in that role who's then able to just simply manage this problem in perpetuity, ends up creating a situation where that person can't go back on things they said before, and that makes them susceptible to having to I don't know a polite way to say it. They're swimming in their own mess. And when you swim in your own mess, you can't necessarily go back and say that you made mistakes 2 years, 3 years, 5 years prior. And so your organization ends up incurring additional residual risk because you're trying to cover your behind.
For all those entrepreneurial folks listening in on this call or thinking about, maybe doing their own thing, can you share, how do you think about, let's call them buyers and personas, that you're trying to sell, products to, but how do you think about these buyers and personas when you're actually trying to build a product to solve cybersecurity issues, not just chasing security marketing buzzwords or throwing out craziness trying to attract, investors? How do you think about navigating, again, buyers and personas with real solutions to issues?
Well, it's funny that you say that. So I've always been on the consulting side to start. So I mean, whether it was like 5th grade, I was riding my bike across town to get FPROT definitions to remove a boot sector virus from my neighbor's PC because she wanted to get online with Prodigy to do work from home, like 1995 or something. I don't know. And so, for me, it's always been services led, direct connect with the customer, understanding what their problem is, and then building a solution to solve that problem. So I've always taken I'd say a purposeful design approach to everything that I've tried to do, where I already know there's a need for it. I already understand the need for it. I've already talked with the people who are going to be buying. Then I go build it. And so that's backwards. I learned from what a lot of people do when they're building a product or a solution. They're thinking, I know what this is. I know what's best, and I'm going to go build it. And then I hope that I can attract an audience. Which is reflected in the traditional VC process, where you have a guess as to what you want to do. You convince somebody that guess may or may not be right. They assume that there's going to be a 1 out of 10 success rate, and that you're going to have also 1 out of 10 that's going to return the fund, and then you go off to the races. And I just have never felt like that made a lot of sense. I've always felt like you can be more purposeful in what you do, and if you have really good design partners who understand user experience, customer experience, you start with the customer experience expected outcomes, back into what you need to deliver those outcomes, that you end up in a much better place faster. And so that tends to be how I break those problems down. And I've been able to cheat because I've got a really great product design partner that I've used for many years, and they make that second nature.
So I've been pretty much asking everyone these days to try to get their hot take on ransomware. So I'm really curious about if you have a rant for us on ransomware, particularly a rant when thinking about future state, not the present state.
Okay, ransomware. You have any more teasers than that? I can go a lot of directions with this, and I've definitely got a rant or two stored up. But you want to shape that a little bit more, or do you want me just to have at it?
I am super happy for you to have at it. Obviously, I think you have a crypto flavor on your rant as well. But I feel like these days, ransomware is another one of those like marketing buzzwords that we were just sort of talking about. So I'm curious about when you're thinking about ransomware, but you're thinking about the future of how do we really solve for this. Where's your head?
Well, first, ransomware is completely preventable, and so that's the biggest problem right now, is that I feel like we're not doing the basics, the blocking and tackling. I don't mean like, hey, patch management, you can see all the problems before they happen, and we need to go fix it. I think that the patch management problem is too big to a certain degree for modern IT operations to be able to manage in an effective way based on the methods that we've used from yesteryear. But ransomware, there's not a lot of patterns that have to be solved when looking at ransomware. And I benefit quite a bit in my thinking on this after selling Rook security to Sophos and being able to be around some of the brightest, most brilliant engineering minds out there in this space, and learn from them, the different methods and tactics that are utilized by those who write encryption methods that are utilized in ransomware. And so there's not very many ways that you can encrypt files, and to do so at scale is pretty easy to block. The reason that people don't do it is because these endpoint solutions oftentimes have multivariate settings in them, and those settings, let's just pretend like a 1 to 5 setting. There's a pretty well-known vendor out there who has a kind of a scale like that. Most of their customers are at a 3. And not getting to a 4 doesn't block DLL hooking. And so it's like, look, this is something that we can solve for, but people aren't solving for, and they're accepting that residual risk. When I feel like if people understood that moving that setting from a 3 to a 4 increases your resilience from, let's say, a 40% likelihood of being able to withstand that attack to getting to like an 85%. But then that makes your IT team and your other internal organizational partners have to work harder to get things configured and managed correctly. And so basics like that need to be done, and need to be done more fully than they've been historically. There's quite a bit more there, but I'm going to take a breath, Jake, and see what you're thinking there.
I think you're hitting it spot on and sort of mind melding here, because I've seen just so many organizations actually have the tools or the partners, or let's just say the security tool that has even a feature that, is claiming they can stop ransomware or whatever it is, and it's turned off. And when I ask, well, why is it turned off? They said, well, when we turned it on, it broke everything. And then it just stops there, right? So I feel like it's to your point, without a doubt, you've got one angle of this where it's, the IT teams and organizations, instead of they hit a road bump, they stop and turn it off. But I also am hoping that, our tooling that we're selling to clients actually stops breaking things all the time and makes it easier for implementation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's really hard to roll some of these technologies out. Each vendor makes it really hard to rip and replace their software, understandably. And in doing so, we end up with endpoint wars and other problems like that. Those are just part of the market forces that are out there. When we look at the effectiveness of these technologies, they have to be effective in an operating environment that's realistic and not just in a lab. And I think if we had groups who are really focused on designing performance testing around those areas instead of lab environments, we'd get a better picture as to what's actually effective and what's not effective. A quick teaser of an area that I'm working on with this new startup is around how do you know which products are performant for those that are like you. Each organization has a unique stack and a unique set of configurations within that stack, and a unique way of managing to those configurations and to that technology stack. So how do you actually distill those unique threads in a manner that helps you make decisions based on what you've already got in place and what you want to accomplish? There's not a good way to do that right now, and I want to bring that to life. Part of that is to solve the problem that you're describing. We need to fix the mess that we've already created before we start worrying about the mess that's to be coming in the future that hasn't even started yet. Ransomware, though, is foreseeable. We know how ransomware operators get in. We know what technologies and configurations need to be in place to prevent, detect, and respond to it. We know what services are out there and what internal teams can respond to these active threats. And yet we're not putting all those capabilities in place for something that's foreseeable, preventable, and solvable. It's pretty sloppy. And insurers right now are the ones who are bearing that burden, and inordinately so. Right now, when we look at the market and what's happening, the winners are the security vendors and the criminals. The losers are the organizations and the insurers. And I think that in any market, that's going to change pretty fast, because the people who are paying for all of this are going to get fed up. As soon as they have a better option, they're going to take it. And I think that that's what we need to bring to market here soon. So going back to ransomware, ransomware is always going to be there. There's always going to be some kind of a cyber extortion method for criminals to get money, whatever we're talking about, whether that's fiat or crypto, doesn't matter. Crypto is not the problem either. I continue to be blown away by the ignorance that's spewed by people, especially regulatory people, who think that if crypto didn't exist, that we wouldn't have these problems. We always had extortion. We've always had digital extortions, just carried on different methods. And is it easy to do all this stuff remotely? Absolutely, but it would be just as easy to have other methods of transfer of value. So at least with blockchain, we're able to trace it all back and be able to see every transaction along the way. There's some great analytics firms that are in that space right now. So I think that the problem with ransomware really is that organizations are not incentivized right now to do the basics that they need to do, and they're not able to hold their vendors accountable to their performance yet, because too many places for too many people to hide versus failure delivery. And I think that that's all very solvable, and that we need to bring that to the table here in the next 3 to 5 years.
So I'm going to take you back to a 2014 article that you actually penned for Dark Reading. And it started out and it said, breaches happen, expect to be hacked, expect to lose data. It's all about how quickly you respond. And then it basically said, yes, this answer is true. So, from there, it sort of then went into the reality is that you have to demonstrate due care, right, when you're trying to manage security. So we're 8 years later now, right? Something like that. So do you still believe that is the case for companies? It's not a matter about if, but when, and just do your best from a due care standpoint. Where's your head now?
It's in the same place it was then. So it's not a matter of if, but when is a failure scenario that has become common, and especially within the security organization, to say that it's not possible to keep this stuff from happening. I've never agreed with that. But what I have agreed with is that because we don't have a way to know what works, what doesn't work, and we haven't equipped the industry with a method that they can put into place to see clearly what their residual risk is in the areas of non-performance, that we will continue to see incidents that were otherwise preventable and easily preventable. And because of that, then you need to play the other game. And the other game being making sure that you've covered off on due care, that you can handle the legal onslaught that follows and the regulatory onslaught that follows as well when there's an incident. And I it's very disappointing to me that as an industry we haven't been able to do better than that at this point. But it is where we are right now.
So let's talk about a little bit about the feedback loop. So if an organization unfortunately has a bad situation, sort of what we were just talking about, how can they benefit from that feedback loop of, say, incident response back into this concept we're talking about an effective cybersecurity program?
Sure. I mean, one simple example, I just like the endpoint protection one because it's something that everybody's very familiar with, and it's fairly common, and it's quite frankly a very simple challenge to solve, in my opinion. If you buy a product because of what they're saying it can accomplish for you in a feature sheet, and then you don't actually have the ability to configure it so that it can do what you bought, you got a problem. It's not rocket science. So that's the starting point, is being able to understand, what exactly you were trying to accomplish and why you can't get there. And so when you think about the purchase cycle here, so an enterprise goes out and does a bake off between some endpoint vendors, now it's XDR or whatever we want to focus on. And they go off and they do this extended bake off. They bring in consultants. They talk to their reseller partners. They talk to the vendors. They run things in lab environments that may or may not be reflective of what their actual operating state is. They sometimes have separation in politics between the team who's actually going to manage it ongoing and is responsible for servers and endpoints, or whether or not it's the security team who's selecting this because they're focused on what's the best technology that they could possibly select for their purposes and use cases. And at the end of the day, you end up again with that 1 to 5 scale in settings. Again, this is figurative and just illustrative, and everything's tested to the 5. And yet that wasn't a real operating scenario. And you have to backtrack it to 3 once you put it in place. And now you've got this residual risk that one could argue is 3 out of 5. And that measurement there, if that was actually bubbled up, then what decision options are we equipping the executive team with here? The exec who is responsible for making the decision or letting their team make the decision ends up having to defend the decision. The exec who's responsible for trying to keep everything running and operating ends up fighting against that decision because they said, hey, we didn't get to run this in the way that we wanted to test this and roll this out to the whole organization. So now you're giving me something that isn't even working unless you put it into a setting that breaks everything. So what do you do with that then? And I think the answer is there are not good answers to that problem. We can talk about defense in depth. We can talk about a layered approach to security. We could pivot towards, having your internal or external security services team run threat hunts that are tailored around the limitations around your technology stack and your implementation and the procedural controls that you have, which are all good things to do, but very few threat hunting groups actually do that. So what do you do? And to me, I feel like those are all decisions that could have been front loaded a bit more, and understanding that one technology appears to look better in a check chart or in MITRE testing because it's a lab environment and it's not actually a real use case. And then you set it to a 5 for those non-real world use cases, but you have to back it down to a 3 when it comes into practice is not something that's going to work for organizations moving forward. And I hope that we're able to help bring that illumination on the performance of technology in different operating environments over a time period to life, and show that that's something that is driving effectiveness, and that effectiveness is attainable, and then be able to help people model after peers like them who have been able to show what is effective and demonstrate effectiveness over time.
So for companies that are just struggling right now, there's too much work, too many applications, too many vulnerabilities, too much data, too many security vendors, what do you say to them where they just feel so overwhelmed they don't even know where to start?
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about somebody who doesn't know where they want to start, I'm going to go ahead and assume that that's going to be mid-market and down, or organizations that don't have their own internal security team that's built out and robust. So that the answer would be different if it was inclusive of those groups. So if we're talking about organizations that haven't decided that this is going to be a proprietary capability that they want to have, to be completely blunt, you shouldn't be building this. You shouldn't be hiring this in-house. This should be something that you get as a service delivered for you. And so you want to have the technology and the services bundled together for you. You want to have the technology and services managed for you. You want to be able to hold that vendor accountable. Accountability can mean a lot of different things, but the short of what I mean there is to say that you really want to have a single throat to choke. So I would pick a vendor. Obviously I'm fairly biased to the services stack and technology stack that's at Sophos. So I mean, as where I sit right now, I still believe that the services team there is best in class, and really has looked at the minutia, from how threats get in to how do you detect them, what are the different variables to detection, how do you sort through that, how do you prioritize that at scale, and then how do you do everything ad hoc that's needed to be done as well, while being able to respond aggressively and rapidly. The reason I bring that up, knowing full well that there's plenty of my business partners and friends out there who are not there, obviously, is just to say that, like, I know that because it's the one that I have looked at inside and out. So regardless of what you go with, whether it is Sophos's managed threat response, or whether you're going with CrowdStrike, Red Canary, eSentire, Arctic Wolf, pick your variant of that. It is to go pick a place where you can have technology and services fused together and be able to hold them accountable to the outcomes that they deliver for you. I think that's the smartest and most reasonable thing for organizations to do. And I think that we've made a mistake as an industry where we have created a security center of excellence that was driven by people who were tinkerers and who wanted to design, build, and control every element within that program, because I don't think it's really ever been in the organization's best interest to do so. Usually you don't have a company that also manages their groundskeeping and that is responsible for the fleet of mowers and trimmers and everything else that goes into that, and the fertilizer sprayers and the whole 9 yards. That's something that's best delivered as a service, and you basically rely on people delivering green grass without weeds, right? And hope that it looks nice as well, and they don't blow a bunch of grass all over everybody that's walking around the complex while they're mowing. So why did we end up with cybersecurity being something that we got so specialized around and made it so personal for those that are leading it? And I think it's just because in the 90s, we actually, I mean, I was one. I jumped in. I thought it was really cool stuff. I liked building and playing with the technology. I liked hacking. I liked breaking stuff, seeing what happens. And when you're of that type of a mind, you end up being in a position where you tend to know it better than the rest of the people around you do. And so you want to then control it because you know that's going to deliver the best outcome. I don't think that's the case these days. I think that internal security leaders really need to be more risk-based security practitioners, that they need to be presenting, really looking, I think the security center and the risk center need to become a little more conjoined. I think that the ability for a security leader to be non-technical can actually drive better outcomes in an organization than a technical security leader anymore, because we've been able to flatten the stack between service delivery and technology. And so I don't know. Well, what's your take on that, Jake? I bet you've got some pretty good insights to share.
I think you said it best, but I actually have another question for you that's sort of leading down this path a little bit. I mean, I knew you're a pioneer in the managed service industry, right? And I maybe feel weird to hear that pioneer thing, but I knew you were going to go down that path, right? But what I want to ask you a little bit is sort of what functions are maybe better or easier to implement in a managed service approach. We've talked right now just a lot about managed detection or incident response or threat or whatnot, but are there other parts of a security program that are should be looked at? And in your mind, of having gone through this and helped so many companies, are there characteristics maybe of a function that lead to more or less success when you're looking at implementing?
I think that we're always going to have this cycle where there's going to be large organizations who have created very good sustaining services that are fused with technology. And again, near and dear to me is Sophos, and look at what the leadership there has done. Where hey, this idea of transitioning into a services company and being able to take these disparate technologies that are not easy to integrate and manage effectively together, glue them together with a technology backplane, deliver that then as something that you can do yourself or have delivered for you as a service. And then they continue adding in these new technologies that address the challenges that organizations are beginning to face at scale. And so I think that approach is brilliant. And so as we look at this, I think that we're going to see more of these larger scale technology and integrated technology and service delivery models that now just different technologies get snapped into. And then those continue to be delivered at scale by services teams. I think that the SOC, as we used to know it, that was really more knock-liked, whack-a-mole, what's up gold management alerts from yesteryear, is going away. I think those who deliver like that are going to continue to fail. And that once we actually have a scoreboard to measure to, that people can see and understand that the world's going to change. And those who are effective at taking disparate technologies and managing them at scale are going to be the services organizations of tomorrow. And they're going to continue to scale and grow and bolt in new technologies that are emerging. So whether that is, MFA as a service, whether that's CASB as a service, whether that is, you pick it, blockchain as a service, maybe, all those different pieces are going to become, integrated into those service delivery stacks. And I think that's going to continue happening with these largest ones out there, and that the smaller service providers are going to start getting gobbled up and integrated into those bigger ones pretty fast.
So around June of last year, your LinkedIn, it says that you're working on a new stealth security startup, and you started to give a little hints earlier, and I didn't have to poke too much, but your LinkedIn actually says evaluating an opportunity transcending cybersecurity, insurtech, and blockchain areas of study. So 2 things for you. 1, what the heck does that really mean and what are you up to? And more importantly, are you actually crazy enough to actually do another startup?
Yeah, I've got something wrong with my brain. Yeah, definitely some kind of a genetic malfunction, I think. So yeah, I'm at it again. Uh, I've seen this opportunity for a long time. I think it was probably 2010 when I first started really thinking about it, and that was this idea that to bring it back to what we were talking about before, actually, you have all these disparate configurations, and at the time, a very simplistic view of it is to say, hey, when if an IT administrator at the time or security administrator changes a setting in your endpoint protection from a 5 to a 3, uh, that combined with the context of why they did it and what the outcome of that will be should get bubbled up to the right level within the organization, commensurate with the risk that's being incurred by that simple change. That's one simple illustration just to talk about how efficacy is managed on a daily basis, but the residual risk is being accepted at the wrong level. And I always thought that was wrong. I always felt like if we got the right information to people, they could balance the time, people, and money triangle a bit better versus the residual risk that was being incurred, and to flatten that out seemed to be something of interest. And what I saw over the last few years was really, look, insurers are just getting slaughtered, and we I brought this up before. Something has to change. We need to have cyber insurance. We need to be able to have all risks policies of coverage out there, and we need to be able to have the carriers who provide these be able to be successful at delivering those. And I think that the math involved at this point, the dollars involved at this point, force us to focus on effectiveness. And in the meantime, there is no way to measure what unique combinations of technologies and models, so capabilities, what combinations of capabilities are best fit on their own and in concert with each other for being able to deliver on the outcomes that people expect. And so you've got to find a way to design and build a best fit stack. You have to have a way to preserve that best fit stack against your posture changes and the changes in the threat landscape. And you have to have a way to collaborate and deliver swift and effective incident response across disparate teams and geographies. And at the end of all of that is the ability to know what technologies work best, what technologies work best for specific organizations of specific attributes, and then be able to have the ecosystem work together better between insurance, security technology, security services, law firms, and IR firms, and have everybody play a little bit more to the same game. Right now, I'd say that a lot of times people don't even know what game they're playing. And each of those disparate groups that I just described is going to look at this from a completely different lens, and the rules are different depending upon which lens you're looking at. I just can't imagine playing a sport like that, and this is turning into a sport. It's turning into some call it combat, digital combat. Some would say it's a sport. Some would say it's a way of life. But the gist of it though is that we can't even agree on the basics. We can't agree on what game we're playing. We can't agree on accountability. We can't agree on what should be accepted, what shouldn't be accepted. We can't go back and identify the root cause many times. And if we do find the root cause, we can't hold the group accountable who caused that problem in the first place, or the people who made the wrong decisions. Or we can't even learn from those decisions and make sure that we're able to prevent them from happening again, because there's always some other widget or gadget or some other excuse out there. So I feel like it's time for something to change, and I think that we might have figured out a way to do that, and I'm looking forward to seeing that prove out here soon.
Sounds pretty exciting. Make sure you keep me in the loop when you're moving things forward. So here we are, sort of at the end of the show now, and I just want to give you a chance to share anything else on your mind, or sort of any other thoughts as we close things out.
It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Top of mind for me is just how do we help organizations solve these problems at scale? How do we help align the market incentives so that insurers are set up for success, security product vendors and services vendors are set up for success, the organizations that need to go out and find and consume and manage to those success criteria internally are able to do so, and make it as easy as drag and dropping widgets around and knowing real time what's going on. And I just feel like we need to get there sooner rather than later, because I'm sick and tired of seeing the economy hemorrhaging all this cash to our adversaries out there. So I'd like to see that stay closer to home. No matter what country you're in, you want to keep your wealth and not have it go to those who wish to do you harm. So that's where I'm at, and looking forward to hopefully making a bit of an impact on that.
All right, and there we have it. JJ Thompson, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you sharing your insight, and again, just really thankful that you're taking the time to be with us today.
Jake, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of The Right Security. As always, we'll have more details and links in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, leave a review, all that sort of stuff. And you can learn more about RBS at our website. Thank you for tuning in.